Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. And we had our very first one back in February. It has been a while. It's June, FYI. Just in case we didn't know.
How many members you guys have total? How many members you have total?
I probably have, I'm sure. You know how many members we have? 40. Yeah, we've been averaging anywhere between 20 and 40. And then we've been doing some of the digital stuff. So not sure how we measure that, but it's been pretty good. Obviously not the best start since we got kicked off for the year and then got stopped, but was Jeff coming back? Was he starting the meeting or are we okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah, the Zoom's up and running. We're recording. We should have audio. We're streaming the video.
Okay, we good to go?
If he's working, we're good.
Go for it.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everybody, both in person and online. My name is Josh Widlow, Director of the NYPN as far as the committee chairman. So thank you for joining us today. So before we get started, I do want to just kind of highlight a few activities coming up before we get into our kind of main event. So Jack Williams is joining us today. But as far as calendar events coming up, there are a few things that I wanted to let you all know about. So we have Freedoms and Fireworks, which is going to be held in South Park on July 4th. So that is going on. It's basically from 1 p.m. till 10 p.m. And I think we'll have all of this up on Facebook page as well as LinkedIn page if you want to find these as well. So July 23rd, new teachers breakfast. July 24th, there is an industrial appreciation golf tournament on the 24th. And then the 31st, we do have our 5th Friday coffee at Freedom Bank. And then our next NYPN, as part of our Pathways to Success series, will be our very own Amanda Lee joining us, and that's August 11th. So lots coming up. Obviously, I think what we'll continue to do is kind of this combined digital in-person format. So we'll see what sort of feedback we get from the team here. So with no further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our guest today. So Jack Williams. I've had the privilege to work with Jack probably 14 years now, or at least known Jack for about 14 years. So it's been quite some time. I'll let him give a little bit of his background. So Jack, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'll let you tell us about who you are, what you do, and some of your brief history.
Sure. Jack Williams, currently president of WinTech, and kind of going back through history-wise, really started my career off in the Air Force. So decided about the time Top Gun came out that that's what I wanted to go do. And I think I was in 6th or 7th grade at the time. First it was going to be the Navy, and then I found out the Navy went on boats for like 6 months at a time. I was like, well, that sounds fun. So I decided to go to the Air Force side. So went to the University of Arkansas, did the engineering and ROTC with the sole goal of going to flight school. So I ended up going to flight school around 1998 is when I graduated, went to flight school. Was in the Air Force for 7 years, and then my wife told me it was time to go and get a real job. And so at that time, we knew we wanted to move back somewhere close to home. Northwest Arkansas was kind of the area we had targeted. So went back there and went to work for a company called Conair. I had no idea what they did. All I knew it was an engineering job, and it was in Northwest Arkansas, so I checked 2 of the boxes. Started there, worked there for about 2 years, and actually got contacted by a headhunter for a job up in Monette, Missouri, and never heard of Monette at all. But basically it was for EFCO. And so for an engineering manager for EFCO, ended up taking that job, moved up to Monette in 2006. And I've been here ever since, worked for EFCO for 12 years, somewhere around in there. And then had the opportunity after the most recent acquisition from Apogee. Nothing against Apogee. I think that's a fantastic fit for EFCO, and had the opportunity to go across the street to WinTech, and a little bit smaller of a company, and had some appeal to me. So went over there in July of 2017.
Awesome. Well, so Jack, you've obviously done a lot of different things, and so one of the things that comes up a lot from especially young professionals is, how do you maintain that work-life balance? What do you do?
Yeah, so for me, one of the biggest things from a work-life balance standpoint starts with the job itself. And when I say that is, I have to have a job that I enjoy. And yeah, I'm not one of those that say you have to absolutely love what you do and strong passion, but at the same time, it can't be, in situations to where you're on Sunday night, you're dreading going into work the next work week. For that, what ultimately will happen is that'll start to spill over, that dissatisfaction will spill over into your home life. So I think it starts with at least having something that you enjoy, or for lack of a better term, don't just dread going in. And then, a lot of people want to focus on the total hours of work. I mean, if you actually enjoy what you do, then the total hours of work are much less of a factor. And I'll kind of give you an example. Whether you work 10, 11, or 12 days, really, or hours a day, for me, it's what I do with the time outside. So, the work side, 10, 11, 12, whatever that is, then there's a life side. And I look at my typical day as I usually, go to bed around 11. I get up at 5, so I only sleep 6 hours. I get some people like more sleep than that. But the point is, if you sleep 6 hours, take an hour to get ready, take a shower, do whatever it is, throughout the day. And now you're setting 7 hours. And I'm typically at work, 10, 11 hours. So that's 17, 18 hours of a day, which says I've got 6 to 7 hours for the life portion. And I think really the balance comes down to how well I spend that life portion. If I'm coming home and I'm flopping down on the couch and watching an hour or two of TV, I go eat dinner and an hour on social media, I really start to feel just kind of in a rush at that point. I'm not a huge fan of self-help books, but I do like to read. One I highly recommend, if it's not read, it is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And they talk about in there, they refer to it as sharpening the saw. And so they say pretty much you need to make sure that throughout the week you're spending time on the physical aspect, mental aspect, your spiritual aspect, and your social and emotional aspect. So 7 hours and spend it wisely within those 4 pillars, I usually feel I've got a really good work-life balance going.
So you kind of hit on this, but how do you stay motivated personally to avoid that burnout? So obviously, work-life balance is one of the.
Yep, I think work-life balance is key. I think it's real important to have something outside of work. So my only identity is not WinTech Jack Williams, and whether that's volunteering, church with your church, whether it's volunteering in the community, something that gives you an identity outside of your job, I think is critical, because then allows you to compartmentalize the 2 lives. And the other thing I think is really important, and I will tell you, I was terrible at this for the longest time, is taking a day, and this kind of gets to I'm a very firm and strong Christian beliefs. But some of the principles tie over. I'm not saying you've got to go become a Christian, but the concept of taking a day and just resting and relaxation is very critical. So when I was young, it was absolutely no way. I've got to get ahead. I was very driven, very motivated, and that will burn you out. Just that constant being turned on, if you will, or you never get to turn that switch off. But what I found is if you actually take a day and turn that switch off, and for me, it's Sunday. I'll go to church, and then there's usually lunch, and usually something with the family, whether it's canoeing or whatever the case may be, something that just really pulls back, and I'm not really thinking about work that much. Now, the first inclination you're going to have is, but yeah, I'm just not going to have time to get everything done. But what I found out is when I'm really doing that well, my other 6 days are much more efficient because I'm not feeling that burnout. I'm not sitting there staring at the clock. This day going on forever. Just keeps you more motivated, like you said.
So you kind of hit on this in your introduction as far as what brought you to Monad. So I'm going to switch it up and ask more. You're not native to Monad, correct?
That's correct.
So why have you decided to stay here the 14, 15 years now? I mean, what's kind of drawn you to cultivate really life in Monad?
Monad first off, it's very close to the town that my wife and I grew up in. We grew up in Greenwood, Arkansas, which is a veteran community of Fort Smith, and right at about 7,000 people. Doesn't have quite the industry or anything, but the school system and all that is very similar. So that's been very appealing to us. And then raising a family in that has been absolutely fantastic. Prior to this, our kids went to Northwest Arkansas school system, which that was before Springdale split, so they were graduating 2,000 kids in a class. And so just that And basically, the ability to get involved in anything in a city that large is very hard. Where you come to a small town, it's very easy for your kids to get involved in different schools, very easy to get involved in the community and become just a more productive member of the community. So that's been very appealing for us.
So from a leadership standpoint, obviously in your role at WinTech and other roles, what type of culture do you really try to work to cultivate, and how do you do that as a leader?
Yeah, so really I kind of subscribe to two theories when it comes to leadership. The first one's a very popular one, that servant leadership has been out there. I think that's can't be overstated on how important that is. The visual I always think of in servant leadership versus the authoritative leadership is the team pulling the chariot, and the one leader is in the back of the chariot cracking the whip. Whereas a servant leadership is you're on the front pulling the chariot with them. And I think it just has served me so much better. It basically, from a servant leader, if your goal is to improve the lives of your employees underneath you and improve the lives of your managers and help remove obstacles for them to do their job, they're going to do a great job. And what happens when your employees do a great job is you ultimately do well. So the better they do, it's almost like the better you do in a leadership standpoint. So a couple things is I always want to make sure that one, I am not a micromanager in any way, shape, or form. I think it's very dangerous. If I'm standing over somebody and telling them this is how you need to do this, well, I really don't need that person. And two, I'm not giving them the opportunity to succeed. Really all they're doing is executing my will, and they're not learning to make decisions or to be a manager on their own. So typically I like to give, especially as they get up into mid-level and senior level managers, is give them the opportunity of, hey, here is the direction I want to take this, and let them really go and dive in and become experts at it. Because especially as you get up into higher leadership positions, you can't be an expert at everything. And if you try to be an expert at everything, you're going to fail in some aspect. Whereas if you've got people that you can rely on underneath you to set a direction and let them execute a strategy, they can provide you with the information you need to know to make decisions. The second I subscribe to, and this probably goes back to my military days, is extreme ownership. And that is, as a leader, and pretty much the principle there is, as a leader, if it happens if you're part of that, it's your responsibility regardless. And the classic example is, the team or the manager comes to me and says, well, I can't do this because my team is unable to do it. Well, then my question is going to be, okay, you as a leader, why is your team unable to do it? Is it one, have you set the expectations? Two, have you properly trained them? And if the answer is no to either one of those, then the reason your team can't perform is because you've not done your job as a leader. If the answer is yes, I've properly trained them and I've set the expectations and they're still not capable, then you probably have an individual that's not in the right position. And so I'm not an advocate for, cutting people and firing people left and right. Typically what I've found, if somebody's struggling in one position, they have attributes that can be used somewhere else. And so you as a leader, your responsibility is, if that's not the best fit for them, you need to move them into a position that is. And so if you allow them to stay on your team and then say, well, I can't perform because my team's not able, ultimately that's your responsibility as a leader.
So you kind of hit on this. My next question was, how do you deal with bad people?
Yeah, so, and that kind of, you're right, it ties a lot into that last answer, because I think first we define what's a bad person. So you're saying they're not performing at their job. Just like I said, have we properly trained them and have we set expectations? And this is something that you'll fight all through your career. I've got a great example just on my staff at WinTech. So as I mentioned, being in the military, starting on time is something that if meetings start to drift late, I just kind of get that uneasy feeling after having the military kind of beat in your head. From on the flight side of it, we would start meetings. It was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, shut the door. And if you're not in the room, you didn't get to fly that day, which is a bad thing. So that's my background. So I try to be very intentional not to be too militaristic when it comes to leading teams. And so my staff starts at 9 o'clock. And everybody on my staff is, vice president level. So they've got a lot of things that they're dealing with. And so, if they would come in, a lot of times they'll get tied up. And when we started off, every once in a while, one person might come in a minute or two late because they got tied up doing something. And then before long, it was a couple people. And then here a few months ago, it was 5 minutes after, and I've got one person in the room. So I basically, at that point, I said, all right, if we started the meeting, I said, my expectation is that we start this meeting at 9 o'clock. If there's an emergency or something that's super urgent, I understand, take care of that and then come in. But emergencies and super urgent shouldn't be happening every week. And as soon as I made that statement, we haven't started on time. So when you go back and look, whose fault was it that we were starting the meetings on time? It was mine. And you could say, and this is where, when you ask the question, did you set the expectation? I could easily say, well, yeah, the meeting starts at 9, they should know. Well, that's not setting the expectation. The expectation was me saying, when the meeting starts at 9, I want to start right at 9. And since then, like I said, so those weren't bad employees. That was bad leadership on my part. So that's where I think it's critical to set that expectation. The other type of bad employees, that I think of that comes to mind, there's some that just really revel in getting caught up in the drama. And those you almost have to handle, or I think you almost have to handle slightly differently. You still set an expectation, if they're in the back room and they're getting their team members all stirred up and they're throwing out wild conspiracy theories, first expectation is you have to tell them that's, if you got some concerns, talk to your supervisor, talk to your manager, come to my office and talk to me. We can't have just that negativity, because ultimately what happens is negativity, and a person like that, it can spread, like wildfire throughout a company, and people get so working in an environment where everybody is negative and you're constantly in a battle between the management and the employees. That negative energy just ultimately causes the company to struggle mightily. So, that's one that set the expectation, but ultimately, if they can't get past that, that's one that I think you've got to, rather than relocate, is ultimately remove from the company.
So you kind of touched on prioritization and how do you manage time, but let's talk specifically to prioritization. So take out the work-life balance piece. Now within work, how do you manage your time and how do you prioritize that time to make sure you're most effective?
Yeah, so really how I handle my schedule is I start the first of every week and I write down what are the 2 to 3 top things that I have to do within each role to get accomplished that week. And when I say within each role, I mean, obviously multiple roles, wearing the hat of the president of WinTech. I know you said not to include work-life balance, but kind of my process does include it. I'm a spouse and a parent, board members, that type of thing, community and church, those. So I basically sit back and look at all of those and say, all right, the top 2 to 3 things, and basically list them out. So now I've got everything from all of my different roles, what I consider the most important top 2 or 3 things. And then I sit down and I start looking at my meeting schedule, and then I start placing in times, okay, here's when I'm going to do this. And it's usually not, and I stay within schedules. My schedule I look like, so I just look at, so I don't try to do 15 things on a day. I've got 15 meetings. I don't time it down to the hour, but typically if I've got, and a good example is with the school board meeting, we have one on Thursday. There's a packet I've got to review. So one of the things I put on there is I've got to get that packet reviewed before Thursday. So I write it in on Wednesday. That's the time I'm going to take some time out of that day and make sure I reviewed that packet, gone over it. I kind of go through that every step, and that really kind of lays out from a standpoint, and even I list any activities I have during the evenings. So that way I know if I'm not going to be able to go home and review a board packet on the night that's my anniversary, that I've got to take my wife to dinner, that type of thing. So once you lay it out like that, it becomes very easy. And then daily, I just open up. I've got my schedule kind of laid out how I set up, and then I just write up the 5 or 6 things that I've got to do on my to-do list. And so that way I've got the most important things taken care of, and things will pop up within that I still have to do, but always go back to my priority list when my time starts getting short.
And you talked about things outside of work, which is great. I think to your point of it's good to see that as a full umbrella and make sure you're not just prioritizing work versus the personal side as well. What do you see as far as for young professionals? I think a lot of the questions we get from this group are how do we get involved? What are some recommendations you would give me as a young professional? If I want to succeed in whatever avenue I'm on, what recommendations you give me as far as what activities outside of work to get involved in? And then just in general, what recommendations would you give a young professional looking to grow just from your experience?
Yeah, so from activities that are outside, I think anything that supports the community is a positive, because one, you can look at it from one of two ways. A growing community, a strong community, especially if you've got a business in that community, is only going to help your business. So I think that's critical. Two is the networking that comes within it. I mean, the ability to, a lot of my success, like I said, has not come because I'm absolutely brilliant in 15 different areas. I happen to have some very good contacts with people that are very knowledgeable in multiple areas. That's helped out tremendously. So I think getting involved in the community is good. Any type of volunteering that you can do, because like again, that takes that constant pressure of the success mode that, and a lot of young professionals will find that I want to climb the ladder, I want to be successful. If that's all you ever focus on, it'll just start to wear you down over time. As far as habits, I think it's critical to start reading. And I know that's not a podcast or something along those lines to where because the problem we'll have here is, even if you're involved in the community, we are a very small, section of the knowledge and the diversity that's out in the world. Whereas once you can start reading and start, or a podcast or whatever it is that you like to gather information, you start to see that there's a much bigger picture and a much larger world out there. And I just think that helps you keep things in perspective and kind of continue your career.
Any recommendations for podcasts? You hit on a couple books. So Servant, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, I think Servant Leadership's a book. There's a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that's extremely good. Then there's a couple of podcasts. If Andy Stanley has a leadership podcast that I think is very good to listen to. There's a couple of different ones that, from a culture standpoint, one's called The Torch, and there's several out there along that line. The Torch is probably one of the best that just talks about different books. And one that's surprisingly good that I found that I didn't think was going to be that good is called Jocko and Echo. And it is, I'll warn you ahead of time, he's a former Navy SEAL, but he's also got an English degree, so he reviews books, and most of them are centered around books that were combat books. So Napoleon wrote a book, he'll talk about that on there. And he wrote the book Extreme Ownership, which that one, the book, the concept itself is good, the book's okay. It's a little, like I said, it's a little militaristic, I think, overall, but the concept is kind of what I appreciate. But as far as the podcast is very good.
Perfect. All right, so that's all the questions that I had written down. So let's open it up to the group in here or online. So what questions do you guys have for Jack that you'd like to learn more about?
So why'd you decide on the school board? It's a pretty large time commitment with very poor pay.
That's one of those things that when you talk about things in your community that can help the business, I mean, ultimately for WinTech, we are the end customer for some of those kids. And I think I think back to when I was in school, there was such a push to, you have to go to college, you have to get a degree, or you're not going to have any type of life. And like I said, kind of getting outside of, it was a small town, and getting outside of that life and getting bigger perspective, I realized that's not necessarily true. There are very good jobs that you don't have to go to college for. Not every kid is a good fit to go to college. For the kid that is just dying in school and hates every minute of it, to tell him you've got to go to 2 more years or 4 more years of school, or him or her, is just, it's got to be soul sucking for him. So I think kind of bringing that manufacturing, and that's the one thing that, as you look at our school board's, I think, very good. The one thing we don't have a lot of representation on is from that manufacturing sector, which is, I think, the largest employer we have. But, so that was kind of some of the reasons that drove me to it.
And did you intentionally wait until your kids wouldn't benefit from any decisions other than, of course, Maddie? Because you got 2 out already. Some do because they're mad because of something that they're trying to try.
I've always been very leery of becoming a school board member and then people saying, well, he's doing it for the benefit of his kids. But with Maddie being kind of where she was at, and 2 of them already through, I thought all the time it was pretty good.
What other questions or anything, I guess, that we haven't touched on that you've been thinking about from a young professional standpoint that you'd like to share?
No, I think one of the things that I wish I could have gone back and done a better job of when I was younger would have been the networking side. Like I said, I really didn't come into the networking and then the work-life balance until much later. And, one thing as professionals, it becomes you run the risk of getting trapped in a job. What I mean by that is you get a job that pays very well and you hate it. It sucks the life out of it. And what happens is so many times we'll set a lifestyle up around a certain level of pay, and just absolutely, the best example I have of this is my brother. So he was a chief operating officer in a hospital system in Arkansas, and he made extremely good money and hated every day of his life. And there was, like I said, for him, there was absolutely no way to get work-life balance, and he created a lifestyle around that level of pay. So his struggle was, if I step out, unless I'm going to take a pay cut, how do I do that? And so a lot of times, my only advice would be don't get yourself trapped into that. If you're not happy with what you do, I would make a correction sooner or later, because the sooner you do it, the sooner you can get down the path that you enjoy. And actually, more important than anything is that work-life balance piece. I think even if your goal is I want to get promoted and I want to move up, if your work-life balance is off, it's going to be tough to be at your top performance at work and ultimately get those promotions.
Thank you. All right, anything else for Jack?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned about volunteering in the community. I was just chosen like a month ago to lead a nonprofit organization from Springfield, but it's going to be representing Monet. So pretty much I'm supposed to lead a group of people, pretty much 6 and up. We're going to be doing small projects in the community in Monet. So what are some of the things that you can advise me, like kind of to keep my team motivated to, or recruit more members? Pretty much just to kind of build the team cohesion.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things is getting those first, 5 or 6. If you really get them on board, they'll help spread the message for you. And I think one of the best things you can do going into it is, is this your first leadership?
Pretty much, yes.
A lot of times people are afraid to admit that they don't know everything. And I think that's a disastrous way to approach it, because you've got 6, 7, 8 people that you'll be working with. And if you don't know an answer, go ahead and tell them, hey, I'm not sure, here's what I think. And basically allow them, I think one of the most important things you can do early is allow them to feel like they're truly a part of it and not just doing what you're telling me to go do this, so I got to do this. Allow them input into what the strategy is and what it is and how you want to accomplish it. And I think once you get those original 5 or 6 really energized, and the nonprofit starts doing things that become visible in the community, then I think you'll start to get additional interest.
For me, I've always tried to remember that people are my best resource. And so just like you said, it's okay to say you don't know, and that use your people in your team, because you're only as great as your team. So transparency, I think, is super important. And that honesty piece is huge. Being able to just say, I'm sorry, I messed it up, or moving on from there.
And that's actually true, because we had our first meeting last week, and I even told them I was honest with them. I told them, I grew up in Mexico. I came here in my teens. I still have language barriers, and because in my team there's like about 5 people, and I told them, hey, it's only you that are smarter than me right now, and but we're gonna work with this together, and we're gonna tackle activities together as a team. Everyone's going to contribute to this. Everyone has something unique to offer to the table, So, and I was honest with them. I told them I don't know everything, and I might be good at some things, but not at everything. So I'm going to need everyone's work in this.
With a question. Any other questions, either online or here? All right, if there's nothing else, thank you, Jack, for joining us today. And so as Lee said, this is recorded, so for anybody in this group, they can find this online after the fact, hopefully. So
In theory.
look for it. Let us know if you don't find it. So, all right, with that, feel free to take these, everybody. And Jack, thank you again for joining us. Thank you.
So before you guys go, you should all have the fireworks flyer. Take that to your employer, share with your friends. Some of you should be seeing a different one. Mary should be sharing a different one for you Jack Henry girls. But it is be a great time, should be a big party. First time we'll be doing anything for a while. Definitely, if you're planning to attend and you have children, get those wristbands early because the price goes up significantly, especially if you're a major sponsor. And that is July 1st. Got the list of this. If you've never went through our Leadership Monette class, we're taking applications for that now. I have those available right here. And then a couple of you, I did give membership apps to for the young professionals. Just make sure I get those when we're done. We meet, you've got a calendar for some upcoming things for the chamber as well as the young professionals itself.